The FBI says it is stumped by what seems to be some sort of scam. It involves a phone call to a parent, a screaming child, and then a demand for ransom. And what has happened is that a lot of people have thought that this is actually a real thing. And here to talk about it is David Kushner. He is a contributor for Insider who has written a lot about this and has unfortunately some personal experience with kidnapping. David, thanks for being with us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So let's start with, is it fair to describe it as sort of a scam that these are people who are trying to play on parents' worst fears?
Totally, it's a scam, and it's shocking how many people are getting conned. Because the first thing, once you hear about this, I think you'd never fall for it, but people are falling for it all the time.
And does part of that have to do with sort of the mental state that if you hear a child crying and it's maybe sort of muffled and you can't really tell, you immediately think, God, is that my kid? And then they they essentially have you. Is that part of what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, they're basically, they're cold calling potential victims, and a lot of people hang up, but you only need one, and that one person they get, often they're triggering that fight or flight. So there's just hearing that voice, hearing someone say daddy, mommy, whatever it is, can trigger people into that state where then they just panic and start to become vulnerable.
And one of the reasons that I think some people are vulnerable and may panic is because this is a real thing that happens. Kids do get kidnapped, and unfortunately, I was sorry to read that when you were 4 years old, your 11-year-old brother was kidnapped and murdered. So this thing sort of really exists. Is that what sort of drew you towards this in terms of as a story?
I mean, this is the kind of thing that I cover regularly anyway, technology and crime and that sort of thing. So it's in my wheelhouse. But certainly when I heard about this, actually heard it happen to some people I know personally, it made me reflect on my own experience and kind of how really insidious this scam is.
And by personally, I guess a community in New Jersey, you knew the family. Tell us a little bit about what you learned about them and how this family sort of fell into this and how they dealt with it.
Yeah, I mean, these were just people, the father worked at a software company, and it's in the middle of the day and he gets a phone call and he hears the girl crying saying, "Daddy, help me." Next thing you know, there's a man on the phone saying, "We have your daughter, and you need to give us ransom money." And he's told not to answer any phone calls, communicate with anyone, answer any texts. So he basically is off thinking that she's been taken. And then his wife and daughter, who the wife finds out is safe, are now have to try to stop him because they don't know where he's going and what he may be victim of himself.
And he eventually, he passes a note to somebody who and sort of is able to get some help to stop this?
Well, kind of the opposite actually, because what happened is that he's not answering any phone calls or responding to texts, so there was no way to really let him know that the daughter's okay. And so what they had to do was really just they had to track him using the GPS, software within the phone, and then actually send police there to let him know that this is not real.
Now this is done again without. I mean, everybody's worried about technology that could somehow, take our image, our picture, and sort of put it into a video or a photograph. And there's the equipment is sort of existing now to sort of replicate people's voice, and yet. That's not what's involved here yet. They haven't gotten to the point of actually using deep fakes of audio of your kids.
Yeah, and honestly, that's what surprised me most, because when I heard about this, the rumor around my town was that this had been kind of an audio deep fake where someone had taken audio from the girl's social media accounts. In fact, they're not that sophisticated. These are just canned recordings of crying, teenagers or kids. And then there's a twist that's kind of revealed in the story as to where these calls are coming from, and then it starts to make sense.
You want to give us the twist?
Well, ultimately, this was going on for quite a while, and the FBI really were not able to figure out what's going on. Ultimately, found that there was this kingpin behind this, and that these calls were coming out of prisons in Mexico. And that, that basically the scam is that there are burner phones distributed to prisons in Mexico. Somebody on the outside is running this operation. People on the inside don't care that much. And so as the FBI said to me, what are we gonna do? We can't put these people in jail because they already are in jail.
And this apparently, according to your reporting, this sort of really took off, what, in 2015 in Beverly Hills. Why a place like Beverly Hills, California?
Because there's money. And so they basically just thought of Beverly Hills, even though maybe it's not the wealthiest zip code in the country, certainly up there. And so that's why they targeted that area. And then they moved on to a wealthy suburb outside of Houston.
And it's like they blanket an area code with, with all these calls. Right. And they just need one to sort of pick up and play, and then they're in.
And then they have local people who are working and who can go actually pick up money that's dropped at certain locations. So the way that FBI actually figured out who was behind this was because they had surveillance footage outside of a school in Texas, where they saw a woman coming to the drop spot and collecting the money, and they were able to get her plate, and then that led back to the one behind this.
Do law enforcement say there are any real clear distinguishing characteristics between something that is a scam, that is a virtual kidnapping, and the real thing?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, what they're saying here is that, it's not hard to poke holes in these calls. Like once you hear that voice, you're really not going to hear it again, So probably in the real thing, it's not going to be that canned. But again, I think this idea is that once you've been triggered, you're not going to know the difference.
And what do law enforcement, what do the experts say you should do if you happen to be one of those unfortunate people that gets the call? And let's just assume you don't know whether it's the real thing or whether it's one of these, scams.
Yeah.
What do police and law enforcement suggest that a parent, parent should do?
Yeah. They have 3 words, which is just hang up. Because if it's real, they think that'll just, because with these people, if you hang up, they're likely to just go on to the next person. So that's easier said than done for people who have been kind of galvanized like this. But that's why the FBI agreed to talk with me, and they're trying to get the message out to people.
And I guess the theory is that if it's the real thing, God forbid, then they're going to try again to contact you because they'll think, they think this is a scam. Yeah. We're gonna send them another message or communicate with them in another way.
Yeah.
This family in New Jersey, what's been sort of the lasting impact on them? Have they figured out, was their particular case tied to this Mexican drug cartel jail or?
Right, yeah, they haven't figured out exactly who the specific person is behind it, but yes, I mean, these are coming out of these prisons in Mexico, and it was a call, the call ID, which they figured it out was coming from Mexico. In terms of the family, it's a lasting trauma. There's still trauma, and there's also shame in the sense of how could I fall for this? So that's the thing, is that they go through these emotions even though it's not really happening, and then they have to deal with the fact that they were duped into it to begin with.
I can relate, except not maybe necessarily the shame. I mean, as a parent of 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, I mean, even if it's school hours and you get the call, I mean, I can envision in my worst fear how somebody might snatch a child off of a school playground or grab them from a street. I mean, so I think as a parent, your mind almost sort of automatically goes there.
Right, and I think that I think every parent probably, unfortunately, has had one moment where they can't find the kid at the playground or whatever it is, and you get that shot of adrenaline, and that's basically what's happening. They're putting you into that state, and like I said, I mean, it is a crapshoot because maybe you don't have kids, maybe you realize this is your kid sitting next to you. So most of the calls they make are not successful.
And then for the calls that are not successful, I mean, for somebody who doesn't have kids, who thinks, this is just some crank caller, is there anything that the community at large can do to either help law enforcement or help the FBI and Justice Department try to figure out how to break these things?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to receive one of these calls, I mean, certainly to write the number down and then turn it over to the appropriate authorities. But unfortunately, a lot of the numbers can be spoofed as well. So, but really, they're just trying to raise awareness, because now I think just like an average person won't respond to those emails from Nigeria asking you for money. you kind of know that, and hopefully this public education will help remedy this.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, I'm the person who, when I get an email from my bank saying, "Hey, you're an overdraft," I think, "Oh, this is this is somebody trying to crack my bank." And then it turns out, no, I really am an overdraft, and so I'm sort of erring on that side. But I can also imagine there are certain people out there who, the moment they fear that something bad has happened in their life, they will sort of jump in, and it's hard to persuade them.
Yep.
It seems like a numbers game. Well, did the FBI, the law enforcement, do they fear that this is getting worse? I mean, where does law enforcement feel that they are in terms of keeping up with this?
They did manage to catch some of the kind of kingpins behind this, and they are, and they're all facing their own sentencing. But I mean, really now they're operating on a public awareness level and just trying to get the message out, because it is one of these things that you can't quite stop.
And for families who unfortunately have had to deal with real kidnappings, or these families that feel the shame of falling for a fake one, are there any sort of support organizations or groups that they can go to? Is there much of a community of families that have to deal with this sort of stuff?
I don't know about the victims of it, but that is, I mean, you bring up a good point, because actually, with the FBI, what they say is that most of these crimes go unreported. So a lot of people aren't reaching out and maybe not even understanding that they're not alone in this.
Wow, it is a frightening story, and I'm so sorry, David, to have your own sort of personal connection to this stuff of what you and your family went through. But I appreciate the work that you've done. It's David Kushner. He's a contributor for Insider, and again, the scam is people call, and it sounds like it's your child's voice, and they say that suddenly somebody gets on the phone and says, "Okay, you need to deliver us some money." And again, as David was pointing out, the FBI is suggesting the best thing you can do is to just immediately hang up. David Kushner, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks.